Well, hello, model car fans. Welcome to the Muscle Car Modeler. My name is Ralph, and this week's build I'm featuring here. This is a Lemans racing race car here. This is a 1967 Ford GT. This is the Mark IV, which is continuation of the GT40 program. So while Ford doesn't officially call them the GT40s, but many people do. So this is a GT40 Mark IV, raced only in '67. And this is, they built 6 or 7 of them, I think 8 in total. But it's also part of the Ford J-Car platform, as they started off as, and then they morphed into the Ford GT J-Cars. But this is chassis J6, more specifically, and it raced at the '67 24-hour of Le Mans. And it actually placed 4th. In the race there, but it's got some interesting history on its own, even after that fact. But I can't tell the story of this car and some of the unique history on it without talking about this car, which I did feature before. This is the J5. This is also the '67 Le Mans racer, but this is the winning car. This one placed first, and it was driven by A.J. Foyt and Dan Gurney, and that has a whole story on its own. And after it won the race, everybody piled on the front here, and there's a small amount of damage to the front clamshell and some race evidence there. So, and J5, this was driven by Bruce McLaren and Mark Donohue, and while raced, it had some other things going on and some more drama. And it had evidence of different races, and it did not have a gurney bubble on the top of it. The other one did, of course, with Dan Gurney driving. But it raced, and the rear clamshell had come loose and flew off the car, and they reattached it, and they did some questionable work, which got called out, and they had to bring it back to the pits and fix that again. But when that crash happened and the piece flew off the car, Mark Donohue famously threw his helmet at the car and put a dent in the door. But as I continue on with that part of it, he left his mark on it, and the car had finished 4th at the race. But shortly after that, this is where the story gets interesting, is many years down the road, the car kind of disappeared. It did and it didn't. What ended up happening was a collector had picked up what he thought what he was buying was this car in 1991, as it was painted, and Herald in history said that that was the race-winning car. And the story behind all of that is what he found. He bought the car and he thought he had the race-winning car, but this was 1991. It was before the internet, and he was enjoying the car, but he was researching the car, and he was researching other GT40s and getting up close and personal with those cars and the stories. And what he found was some of the things with this car, like the cracked front clamshell damage, it was lacking that. And there were some other things that were going on as well. And there was another red car in another museum that he saw that also had the Dan Gurney bubble, but it had the lowered front seat and some other evidence on that particular car that told him that that was J5, the race-winning car, and not the car he thought he had. And when he was researching some of the damage to his had the dent in the door, and it also had the repair and damage work here on the clamshell. So he was pretty sure that he actually had J6 and not J5. And there were a few other telltales as well. So when he started researching, he realized quickly and found out that what Ford did was, right after it had won the race, what they did was they took J6 and painted it like this car, and then they also took J7 supposedly and painted 3 cars to look like the race-winning car. So they paraded the actual race-winning car around, and they paraded 2 more lookalikes. They took the other 2 cars and painted them, and somewhere along the line, the Gurney bubble was added. There's 2 stories where a collector in the '70s added it, or Ford added it. But the guy who owns the car since 1991, he left the bubble in there as it makes it a little more comfortable for him to drive and everything. And drive it he does. Reportedly, it's the only GT40 that was ever caught in a snowstorm in New York. Supposedly, he's put 50,000 miles driving it on the streets. So I got to give him props for that, for taking a car like this and driving it and enjoying it, especially if it still has its 550 horsepower 427 side oiler in that thing. If it's definitely got that, and can't imagine him getting pulled over for the loud exhaust and everything. But that's just great. I think that's really cool, and it's been around the shows. But he did restore it and repaint it into this livery, which is how I seen it. And out of the cars and all the different color schemes, this one was my favorite, especially since, you know, the letters actually are outlined like this. These decals, which I can't remember where I got them, because the kit decals were shot, but it's outlined in the number 2 in yellow, and like this car, the 1 is outlined in red. So love the way those are. But these are not the original decals for either one of these kits. But I'll get more into that in a minute here. But let's go ahead and take them outside and see how they look in the sun, see how much more the color pops on them. Well, here she is out in the sun with this bright yellow paint. Now, I don't remember exactly what paint I used, as it has been quite a while ago. But really like this particular version, these colors, especially the yellow outline on that number 2 decal. I think that's really cool, and the blue lines really stand out on these tires in here, and the anodized red knockoffs on the one side, on the driver's side, and the blue ones on the passenger side here. But she's looking really good. Like these clamshells, kind of fun to tilt. Although this one doesn't close very well. Nope, just knocked the lens off. That's something that didn't appear until later. All right. Now let's see what the sister looks like on it. Since I didn't have this one out in the sun last time. Of course, this one's the same way, getting it to sit down. All right. Well, we'll go drag these back inside and continue on. Now, when it comes to the actual build on these, I kind of got a little bit lucky as far as when I bought them. I know this kit's been issued a few times. I'll throw some box arts up here. However, I do not know if the MPC versions are the same as the later ones. These were both the Union kits. It was actually an eBay auction where it said there was parts from 2 different kits. As in the pictures, I could see that there was molded in white parts, and there was molded in red parts, and all the white parts are this one, and all the red parts are this one. And once I actually won the auction, which I think was a pretty fair price, but I don't remember what it was because that was back in 2008, I believe, or 2007, somewhere right around there, because I finished these in like, I think this one I finished in 2008 and this one I finished in 2009. So it was early 2008 or 2007 when I actually won the eBay auction for them. But once I actually got the parts and went through, I had 2 complete chrome trees, and I had all the parts for 2 cars except tires. I basically had 3 out of 4 tires. I was missing 1 tire, but after looking at everything, I was actually missing 2 sets. So these are actually the Revell Goodyear tires right here that you see in some of the monogram and Revell. I like these, and they're, you know, in multiple kits. So I used them on here, and they fit the wheels and everything just fine. So both kits share that, instead of the rubber warp tires that I did have. And that was really the only real mod I did to them, other than I did do some extra detailing. but I had all the parts to build 2 of them, so I was pretty happy about that. And eventually I did buy a Testor's version. I ran into another one of those. I have that. And I got the decals from IndyCal to do the number 3 car. So it's brown and it's the number 3 car with these stripes. I want to do that one as well. But this kit is pretty hard to get to fit, and both of my kits right here don't come all the way down and close, and it gets closer, but it's just not quite right. But the clamshells do move and pivot. They can break pretty easily, but there's tilting the whole front end up so you can get in there and see. And both of them rub on the side of this, so there's a little bit of a clearance issue, but not a real tight. But the rear clamshell opens up beautifully, and there's that 427 there. Kind of a bit out of proportion, but still looks good. I wired it. Both of these have the wired motor, and I believe I drilled out the carburetors a little bit to make them look a little bit better. And then the titanium exhaust, and bundle of headers or snakes of headers. But there's the spare tire, which was required to be raced in Le Mans, but it's kind of questionable whether it had to be the right size or not. I remember reading somewhere in the stories in the rule books that if there was a flyer that a tire that blew, that they had to, the driver had to be able to change it his own. So they had to do it on their own. So jack and tools and tire. But whether or not that still pertained by 1967, I read that in some of the earlier races. But they started to drop the luggage requirements and some of that stuff. And this one's done the same way, since I'm showing them both off. Even though I featured this one before, all the suspension and everything, and the rear clamshell. They're kind of a bit of a challenge to fit and get all these parts to fit and just get them in there. But really, you gotta have them though. For me, I just had to have one of these and build it. So the fact that I scored 2 in one box at a decent price was one heck of a score for me. I was really happy about that. And I was able to build them both, but I did have to find these decals, and I'm sorry, I can't remember where I got them from or who made them. But they were commercially available at the time, but I just can't remember where I got them. But anyway, I figured I would share this one with its story and everything, and what happened to it later in its life, because the race and the history of the car is one thing, which you can't take that value away, which is one of the things I kind of like about that guy who owns it now and drives it and takes it out on public streets and everything, which is really cool. I'll put a link in the story on that. There were a couple, but I'll put the main one on there. So I'll put a link in the video description below. But can't talk about this particular version without talking about this one because of the intertwinement there. But Ford did stuff like that, so it's not really a big surprise. Especially there's another GT40 that got misidentified as another one, and Ford swapped the identification chassis numbers on them, which is not the VIN number, and if the manufacturer does it, it's no big deal. And there's another story about the very first 71 Boss 302 Mustang, the one and only. It was revinned as a Boss 351, and that car, you can watch the video on it, and it kind of shows the sticker laid over the original sticker where you can pull up the one on the door, and it was revinned as one car, Boss 351 instead of a Boss 302. But anyway, the manufacturers, they could kind of do that stuff before they sold them and kind of get away with it. Not so much now, but it's kind of interesting to read these stories and find out these truths and everything. So I kind of enjoy that, and you guys do too, so it's kind of fun to share that with you guys. So anyway, thank you for tuning in, subscribing, and all your comments and everything, and check that video description below for our sponsors and everything. You guys, you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you next time.